Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello everyone, welcome to my podcast. My name is Jackie K and this is Sipping with Jack. On this episode, Sipping with Jack, we'll be discussing moon exploration, why we haven't been back since 1972, and so much more. Also, I'll be highlighting the drink of the podcast, which is a lunar landing margarita. This drink is a funky take on a classic margarita, where instead of using tequila, I will be using a blue raspberry vodka, which gives us this blue, vibrant color, y'all. You will love it, because it's beautiful, but also it's mad yummy. But now let's get into the episode. Also, a quick disclaimer, this is a conspiracy-based episode, so please remember all of my opinions are my own opinions and should not be taken as fact. But now let's get sipping. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is moon exploration. And it's been interesting because there has been a lot of moon exploration, but not as much as you think we have. So, to lay it down, the first country to ever visit the moon was actually the Soviet Union. I know some people are like, oh no, it was, America, because they tried to do the space race with the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah. No, actually the Soviet Union visited the moon in 1959, 10 years before America even got there. And basically, they didn't send humans, they sent robotic rovers, and they sent two of them. One was the Luna 1, and the other one was the Luna 2. Very creative, I might say, but this was the 50s, be it come for their necks like that. The exploration happened 10 years later, which was the first human landing, July 20th, 1969. And it's been our 50th anniversary, which that's kind of funny because I don't feel like anybody really was like excited for it, but I guess that's just me. I'm a nerd, so I get excited about that stuff. But basically, in 1969, America made their trip to the moon, and they actually did it with human beings. And they were able to travel back a couple of times through 1969 to 1972. And they were able to take overall 12 astronauts to walk on the moon. So that was a big challenge, a big, kudos to them for accomplishing that goal. But since 1972, no person has been back. Like, it's been dead, which is very interesting to think about that, but let's keep going to some of these more facts. So basically, 1972, everything in America stopped with the moon, and then they came back in the 1990s, and they resumed more lunar missions, but just robotically. They never went back with people or any of that stuff. But since that whole space race mission, only 7 countries have put any money or effort into exploring the moon, which that makes it a little more suspicious why nobody's really looking at the moon. Can you imagine? There's been over 200 countries in the world, created, but only 7 has been interested in going back. Oh, okay. So anyway, the most recent visits to the moon, if you guys didn't know, China actually launched some rovers to the far side of the moon. They're actually the first country to actually explore the far side of the moon, which is still weird and suspicious because it's 2019 and America literally sent 12 people to the moon, but they never went to the far side of the moon. But okay, I digress. And then the last notable mission that was sent to the moon was in April 2019, so not that far ago. And it was actually a private company based in Israel successfully launched a spacecraft that orbited the moon, but it wasn't able to successfully land on the moon. I guess there were some technical issues where they couldn't. But as you can tell, that's all the moon exploration we have done. Not just America, but other nations such as Soviet Union, private companies, China. There hasn't been a lot of exploration. And that's a little suspicious. I'm not gonna lie. It's really suspicious to think that our moon is basically in our backyard and everyone's kind of ignoring it. And I know people are gonna be like, Jack, and there's just so many other things like money, resources, all of that stuff, which I completely understand. And I am taking account for it, but still, you would think that there would be more effort put into it, since the moon is a big influence on our planet, especially the ocean tides, the daily cycle, everything. But I guess it's not that important, since only 7 nations have actually put effort into it. So before I get into the reasons why I think we haven't been to space, it's very important for me to lay down some of the treaties they have put in place for outer space exploration, especially for celestial bodies, planets, and the moon. The first treaty that they made about outer space was in 1976, which basically this is a good foundation to understand moon exploration and why it hasn't been that great. Basically within this treaty, especially if you go to Article 2, it states that outer space, especially the moon, other celestial bodies, are not subject to national appropriation by claim of any sovereign nation, and it can't be used or occupied by any other means. So basically it's saying that y'all can't claim it, y'all can't have it at all, period. And with that treaty, over 120 countries signed it and amended it. Which it makes sense, because this is before even America was able to travel and send humans to the moon. So I think they were like, okay, yeah, we can sign this, we can do this. But in 1979, they enacted the Moon Treaty, which basically is kind of like the Outer Space Treaty, but it goes deeper, more in depth about ownership and all that stuff. So basically, the 1979 Moon Treaty basically states that no one can own, buy outer space ever. So basically, it cuts off anything beyond the moon, anything beyond our celestial bodies within, or grasp. Basically, it says no one can own anything out space ever, because of the theory that outer space is the common heritage of mankind. So no one can truly own it, because everything out there should be ours and shouldn't be owned by everyone. But this treaty was different from the 1967 treaty because only 11 countries signed this treaty. Only 11 versus the over 120 that signed the first one. This one shook some feathers, And out of the 11 countries, and I think it was 11, no shade to them, but they weren't the top world leader countries, because America didn't even sign this treaty. They were like, okay, we completely off this. We don't want to do this. And both of these treaties basically state ownership of outer space, but it kind of creates a loophole. If you guys didn't catch it, it basically states that a private company or organization can buy outer space land. It says that. So that's why you can go to buy, stars for your, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, you can do that. Or you can buy land plots in the moon and all of that stuff. You can buy that through private companies, but you can't buy it through a nation, I guess. So that's why you have all of these funky little side companies doing that stuff. And that's why you have big companies such as, SpaceX, Roscosmos, some other companies that have started, tickets to the moon, tickets to Mars and all that stuff, because a private company can do that. A country can't. So you see where I'm going with this? You see where I'm doing with this? Okay. So now you got a little, background of those treaties. And I kind of segued a little bit into my conspiracy theory of why we just haven't been back. Let's kind of take a pause before I get into my conspiracy theories, okay? Which I need y'all to get your tin caps on and ready to go, okay? But before we get into that, let us break down the drink of the podcast. This drink is called the Lunar Landing Margarita. As I said earlier, this is a funky twist on a classic margarita. Instead of using tequila, you will be using a blue raspberry vodka. I personally used UV blue because I knew it had that blue color, but you can probably get another form of blue raspberry vodka. Maybe even if you want to add a little food coloring to it, you can still get the same effect of it. I just want to, get that pure color into it. So this is a single serving recipe, and all you'll need are simple syrup, lime juice, blue raspberry vodka, and triple sec. So you'll need 1 teaspoon of simple syrup, 1 ounce of lime juice, 2 ounces of blue raspberry vodka, and then 1 ounce of triple sec. Also, you can add 1 ounce of water just to kind of cut through the heaviness of it, but that is your preference because you will be using ice, and it's gonna melt a little bit, but that's basically your preference. So once you have all of those ingredients placed into a shaker, make sure you shake it up real good with that ice already in the shaker. Pour it into a ready prepared margarita glass. And a already prepared margarita glass, basically you can put some salt or sugar on the rim and put some ice into the glass and just pour that Lunar Landing margarita all up in your glass, and let's get to sipping, because that is how simple that recipe is. Y'all, that is it. We are done. Now let's get to these conspiracy theories, okay? That is basically derives from both of those treaties, is because no one can own anything in space. So what is the whole reason for us to go to space? When you think about it, logically, if you find a piece of land and you're like, oh shoot, this is my piece of land, and then, the government or United Nations, whatever, is like, no, it's for everyone. So what's the point of me even using this land if it's for everyone? That's basically what is happening with the moon. Anyone can have it, so there's really no reason for us to go back there. There's no reason to pour all of these resources into the moon because there's going to be no fiscal gain from it. Can you imagine? Which I find this very interesting. I was looking into space exploration and basically the cost of it. I wasn't able to find the exact cost of how much it took NASA to take astronauts to the moon. I cannot find an exact number on that, but I did find how much NASA spends on each person to take them to the International Space Station, which is the furthest we can get right now. And if you hear the number, you'll be like, dang, I understand they want to save some money, they want to protect their pockets, So NASA pays a private company, this isn't a government entity, but a private company which is called Roscosmos, $81.7 million per seat on their rocket to get an astronaut to the International Space Station. $81.7 million just for one person. So if you can imagine, we're going even further into space and going to the moon. You imagine how much that's going to be. That's going to be so ridiculous. And when they get there, y'all can't really do anything. When you're there, like, yeah, we can collect rocks and we can collect dirt, but we already did that in the early 70s in 1969, so what is the point of doing that again? If there's no point of us going there, creating, a laboratory or a colony there just for the time being so we can explore or understand the moon is basically useless because they're not going to get a return on that. Because you imagine, I don't know who created the International Space Station, but the International Space Station is for everyone. Majority of countries use it. Like, a lot of big nations use it. So when you imagine if who's going to build the colony up there? No country can do it because they can't claim it. So what, we're all going to go halvesies on it? And you can see already how countries don't like each other. And you can see already how America is viewed towards other countries. Literally, we're like a joke to other countries, and it makes me sad. And that's another discussion and another later day of how Americans are viewed around the world. But when you think about it, through that lens of basically any nation that goes to the moon, they can't own it, they can't claim it, they can't really do anything with it and expect a fiscal gain on it. So it's like, what is the main reason for them to even go? Because, okay, America went there back in the 70s. We can just collect their lab data and all that stuff and understand the moon through that. Boom, we got telescopes. You can see what's going up there. What's going on the moon. Clearly nothing. So it's like, okay, so why do we need to spend over $100 million per person to take someone up there and not get anything back from it? And when you really think of that, it makes complete sense why we haven't been back there. Because whose pockets are lined that deep? Well, countries are, but they don't want to waste their money like that. And this was also something that, was really interesting when I was listening to this. Basically, if you remember about the treaties, and I'll keep referencing back to those treaties because they really create the storyline of why we haven't been back to the moon or really engaged with that much exploration. And I know people are going to say, satellites. I know, there are satellites. But, taking people to space. That's what I mean. Why we haven't really taken people to space, okay? Why we haven't done that. And the reason why there's been so much emphasis or creation of private space companies. Hear me out. This is y'all have to hear me out with this. So basically, since we haven't been back to the moon since 1972, there's been a lot of private companies created to make, spaceships, that stuff, because basically most of the rockets and all that stuff, they're outsourced. They're not made by NASA. They're created by other companies, private entities that are given government loans and all of that stuff. So when you think of that, there's been a boom of those companies recently because they know too that they themselves can have a capital gain off of the moon, right? Capital gain from going to, celestial bodies, going to Mars, going to the moon, because they're not in that treaty. So they could do whatever they want because, hey, who's going to stop them? I'm not represented by any nation. I represent myself, yo. So when you think about that, you have companies such as I said, Roscosmos, who are basically the shuttle taker of astronauts to the International Space Station. You have SpaceX selling tickets to the moon, which are $35 million per person. Child, that money is so dang high, it almost blows my mind. But when I think about it, because I was listening to the press release from Elon Musk, he said it's going to cost about $5 billion just to make the rocket. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess you kind of have to make a return on your money. We get it. But I think that's why there's been such a boom on private companies, is because countries know that they can get away with going with private companies versus doing it themselves. So they could save money and just basically hitch a ride. And I think this is such a smart business move when you think about it, because, hey, it's the mindset of okay, the person who starts it, they have to put so much effort, money, resource, time in it. But then you'll have someone who's like, okay, I'll just basically ride your coattail and then we'll be fine. And this is the reason why I think this is happening because, okay, as I said, SpaceX has been, selling tickets to the moon for $35 million per person, which I choke. I literally just choked after saying that because that's so expensive. But when you think of Roscosmos, which their ticket to go just to the International Space Station is $81.7 million. Wow, okay? I think SpaceX is the Walmart of astronaut, traveling. So maybe NASA, if you're listening, maybe take SpaceX next time because you're going to save, like 50% of your money. Think about it. SpaceX, they're starting to sell tickets to the moon. And there's actually someone who has bought tickets to the moon. And they bought a ticket for themselves and for 8 other people. So, dang. Okay, sis has money. He's actually a Japanese billionaire. And he bought, 8 tickets for artists such as, fashion designers, architectures, photographers. And he was saying he just wants creative people to come with him to view the moon because they'll be able to view the moon in its actual natural beauty versus like other people. So I think that's pretty dope. And basically this trip cost him over $280 million just for the ticket. But they won't be able to go to the moon until like 2023, right? But here's the thing that comes really suspicious from that. So basically, Elon Musk was like, yeah, we got people going to the moon. We're going 2023. Don't hold me to that. Because he basically said, don't hold me to that. But they're shooting for 2023. Did you hear NASA? NASA comes out literally back in March, I believe. They're like, yo, we're going to go back to the moon and we're going to take people. But you know when they're going to go back? 2024. How convenient is that? Like literally right after SpaceX was like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do it real hard. And then NASA's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to go to... You know why? Because they can use SpaceX's spaceships. Because if they see SpaceX successfully do it themselves, they could just buy a ticket on their dime and be like, okay, hey, we'll just buy a ticket and we can just take our people up there. Because already they're being slaughtered with these prices with Roscosmos, $81.7 million? Girl. And SpaceX is offering $35 million per person. You know they're going to catch up on that. So I think the main reason, as I said earlier, it's just basically greed. They don't have money and they don't have the time or the resources to put into something that they can't claim or can further themselves. So that's why all of these bigger companies, such as these private companies, are doing the thing, doing all of the work that basically NASA and all of these other space organizations, especially government organizations, should be doing. But they're having all of these other small private companies do the work for them because they can enable this loophole of having these private companies go there, start colonies, do all that stuff because, hey, it's easier work for them. Well, it's easier work for NASA not to put all that work in because basically they can just buy a ticket and ride that wave. Which really bothers me and annoys me because I feel like if NASA is still a government, organization, I'm paying taxes. Like, girl, I want you to know all you can know about space. I just feel like if you really listen to everything and understand, exploration and these different treaties, you can definitely understand why we just haven't been back. I always originally thought that it's like, oh, the reason they haven't been back is maybe like they found aliens or they found something crazy or like they've just never been there. And that's also, a conspiracy theory about the 1969 landing where they basically say we never been to the moon. That's why we can't go back to the moon because we've never been there before. I as I said earlier, still kind of collecting my own thoughts about that. But when you think about it, there is no purpose for us to go back to the moon truly because we're not going to build houses there. We're not going to have, amusement parks. We're not going to, have tourism there. So what's the point of doing anything with it? And I think that's kind of the mindset of these, bigger nations, especially bigger nations that have the funds and the resources to put effort into all of this technology to be able to sustain being on the moon. It's just like, for them, what is the point? Because at the end of the day, they can't do anything with it. They're just like, okay, well, everyone can have it, so what's the point of me putting in that money for everyone to use? Yeah, that's just basically it. Like, I'm not going to shelf out this money and know that another nation's going to be like, I bet I'm going to use this too, when they didn't put any money or effort towards it too. So that's just basically my thoughts of everything. I'm going to be super honest. If it came off very ranty and just super tin hat-ish, is because it's just conspiracy theories, because we don't really have hard evidence. There was actually a part in the documentary I was watching basically talking to a former employee of NASA, basically saying that they just lost interest of it. Like, when they went to the moon in 1969 to 1972, they learned as much as they could. So basically for them, there's just no reason for them to go back. And I think that is a little true, but I guess to think that it's just like it's not that important kind of makes me think that there's more things underneath, and that's what caused me to dig a little bit more and to understand, yeah, it's basically because of money. Like, that's the only reason we haven't been back. And, if you want to see an example of something like that, just look at Antarctica. Fun fact, the Moon Treaty was actually based off of the Antarctica Treaty, and you could see Antarctica, nothing is going on there. Nothing. And I remember talking to someone, and they were like, well, it's just ice. But it's like, the Arctic right now is being excavated for resources by multiple countries because they can own pieces of that. So Antarctica isn't being touched because they can't do anything with it. I want to throw this back to everyone else. Do you believe it's because we never been to the moon and we just aren't capable of going back? That's why we just haven't been back. Or do you really think it's just because of all of these, politics, bureaucracy, greed, and all that stuff, which I really feel like it's just greed. But let me know what you guys think. Now that you guys know all of the conspiracy theories that I believe why we haven't been back to the moon and all of the future exploration to come, I wanted to talk about my Trigger Trish story of the week. I didn't do one last week just because there really wasn't any story that I felt that, brought something outside of me, you know what I'm saying? But this week there was something. And it's interesting because I did talk about it last week, but I wasn't that, frustrated with the story at all. And the story is Kevin Hart's crash. Yes, I'm talking about it again. This story really triggered me now because y'all lying to us, and we know the whole story doesn't make sense, at all. As I explained last week about Kevin Hart's bodyguard removing him from the car, leaving literally everyone else in the car, and just taking him home, and just not saying anything about the crash for 2 hours, blah, 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 blah. This week, there's more information that came out, and I guess this really bothered me because the lies, all of the lies that are happening. For example, so basically, last week I explained that Kevin Hart was in a crash, a really bad crash, with 3 people. So it was him, his trainer, and then the trainer's fiance. And basically they were saying the girl was trapped in the back seat, but she wasn't injured, and then her fiance was driving the car. So, that whole story was kind of weird because it's weird. But anyway, so basically came out that there is no back seat to this car. Not at all. It was a 2-seater. So for that whole story to say that, the girl was trapped in the back seat, that's why the bodyguard never took her because she was trapped. That was his story. He claimed he could not get the girl from the car because she was trapped in the back seat. Honey, there was no back seat. So what are you talking about? Like, I'm so confused. It's like the lies that they're saying to cover up this story is just adding more nonsense to the story, because he said, oh, he couldn't get the girl, but he was able to get Kevin Hart from the driver's window. Turns out there was no back seat, so it turns out the girl was sitting on Kevin Hart's lap. So why didn't he take her? If she wasn't injured, Kevin Hart was the only one that was, well, Kevin Hart and the bodyguard, they were severely injured, especially with major back injuries. But the girl wasn't really hurt, but y'all never took her. And yet, the girl was sitting on top of Kevin Hart. So I don't know where she went for the bodyguard to be like, okay, there's a whole grown woman sitting on Kevin Hart's lap, a whole grown man sitting next to Kevin Hart, but like, the bodyguard was able to take Kevin Hart out of the car and was like, deuces to everyone else. And it's just so weird, because now the narrative is not spinned at all to even talk about the selfish reasons of Kevin Hart leaving everyone else in the car, even though that's very selfish and it shows something about him. But basically, the other two people in the car, we know nothing about them, like nothing, which is very interesting, because I was listening to someone else talk about this, and they're like, wouldn't somebody come out to say, hey, they're doing okay, they're doing fine, but no one's coming out? Not even like a cousin, not even an auntie, an uncle, not even a sibling. Like, it's completely dead on their side. Like, nobody knows anything about these other people. And I think that's very weird, and I think that's truly why they're trying to cover up something. But, you know, hey, I don't know. The car scene doesn't even make sense either, because it looked like they were trying to brake and then turned into the ravine. But, you know, cops were saying, oh, they just lost control. That looks like I don't know. This story just doesn't make sense, and I get really mad because Kevin Hart somehow is not getting any blame for the car crash, even though it's his car, and even though he left two people, like, in the car and just was, like, gone, even though the driver, aka the driver, I'm having air quotes right now, because witnesses saw Kevin Hart being removed from the driver's seat, but whatever, we're just gonna ignore that fact. But basically, the driver, which is the trainer, he sustained serious injuries. So I kind of want to see why nobody's talking about that. Also, sources are coming out saying that people who called 911, because it wasn't Kevin Hart or the bodyguard or anybody on Kevin Hart's side of the story called 911, and somebody called 911, and the bodyguard was there getting Kevin Hart, and he went off at the person, like, why would you call 911, blah, 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 blah. So this story just seems very off and weird, and I think it's kind of suspicious that Kevin Hart, as I said earlier, that he isn't getting any of the blame, but he should be. And also, I was listening to a story on the news where they're talking about how dangerous these cars are and how they should start changing the laws for it. No, boo-boo! It's not because of the car, it's the person who's driving it, truly. And whoever was driving it, which I really do truly believe it was Kevin Hart, it wasn't the trainer. Oh, I don't know, or the thing is, the story just doesn't make sense, and we need to stop changing the story to be like, oh, whoa, it's Kevin Hart, but it's like, he did some pretty crappy things within this storyline, and all I'm just saying is, look at Aniko's face. Look at her, because she clearly does not care what happened, because she probably knows the true story, and you can tell that she hasn't been like, oh my gosh, my husband, I'm praying for his, recovery or anything. She's been dead silent, because she probably doesn't care. I think she's been through too much, let's not forget Kevin Hart did cheat on her birthday while she was pregnant, so I think she was just kind of over it, because I feel like he is a strong liability to his family and to himself, and I feel like, just listen to everyone around him. Just hear what people are saying, and people are truly not saying anything, because I think people really, well, there's some people like, The Rock and other people, but like people who are truly like family friends, they ain't saying nothing, because I think they're over it. They're over it too. But anyway, that was my Trigger Trish story of the week. I hope you guys liked this podcast. This is something truly different that I wanted to do, because as I said, my podcast, we're going to be talking about everything and anything, and especially that entangles conspiracy theories and, popular topics, religion, fashion, beauty, like all of that stuff. And I feel like this is just a gateway into opening more doors. So tell me what you guys thought about this podcast, and what are your own feelings about the whole moon conspiracy theory. I'm definitely gonna leave the moon landing in 1969 to another podcast. I'm still trying to develop my own true feelings about it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, as I said earlier, I've been watching some moon documentaries. Some things are making sense, but some things don't add up. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to save that when I have a little more information, feel a little more confident to talk about. But thank you again for watching, and thank you for supporting me. And don't forget to follow me on my Instagram, which is called SippingwithJack. You'll be able to also see the recipe of the week on there and instructions, basically how to make it. So follow my personal Instagram, which is Jacqueline WK. The information will be linked down below, and I will see you guys next week. Don't forget to keep on sipping, y'all.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.